It's Ash from SuperVideos back for another video for The Last of Us on HBO. On this video, we're going to be taking a look at how are they gonna deal with the Abby storyline in the upcoming season 2 of The Last of Us HBO adaptation, and whether they're gonna repeat the Abby controversy, we can call it, in the TV adaptation. So stay tuned, we'll be right back to break this down. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that said, let's dive right into it. And of course, spoiler alert if you haven't played part 2 of the game, because we're gonna go through some details from part 2 of the video game that they're probably gonna adapt to some capacity in the TV adaptation. So this is your spoiler warning. So with that said, let's get right into it. Now, if you've played or even heard of The Last of Us Part 2, you know one of its most controversial aspects was the character of Abby. Abby is introduced as a new protagonist who seeks revenge against Joel for his actions at the end of the first game. Again, spoiler alert, but obviously we're referring to how he handled the doctor situation at the end of Season 1, similar to how he dealt with it at the end of Part 1 of the game. And obviously this led to a lot of backlash from fans who felt that Abby was a poorly written character and that the game's story was disrespectful to Joel and his legacy. So the question is, will the HBO series stick to the controversial Abby story, or will they change it to lessen the controversy and backlash regarding Joel's early departure and just in general how his death was handled? First of all, let's acknowledge that this is a difficult question to answer, as we don't have any official word from HBO or the show's creators. However, we can speculate based on some clues and hints that we've received so far. And of course, using Season 1 as a starting point in terms of what might be in the creators' minds as far as what they want to bring into the TV adaptation. For starters, it's worth noting that the show's creator, Craig Mazin, has said in interviews that he's a big fan of The Last of Us and that he's very respectful of the source material. Of course, we also saw that he worked pretty closely with the writer and director of the game, Neil Druckmann, and of course he's also the writer and executive producer on the show for Season 1 and Season 2. So this suggests that the show will be faithful to the game's stories and characters, just like it was in Season 1. Of course, they changed things here and there, but overall, I don't think they did anything that deviated from the source material significantly. The only time when they even went close to something like that was how they dealt with the Billstown story, but even that, at the end of the day, the outcome was the same. The only thing that changed was the journey to get there and kind of the storyline in Billstown itself. However, it's also worth noting that the show is not a one-on-one adaptation of the game. Again, like we saw in Season 1, they deviated from the source material here and there. Although impact to the story was minimal, there was definitely changes. Mazin has said that he'll be taking some liberties with the story in order to make it work better for TV. We saw that in Season 1 in some of the episodes. He's also mentioned that they will be introducing some new characters that weren't in the game for Season 2, just like they did for Season 1, bringing in some new characters like Frank and other characters that we met along the way. This suggests that the story will not be a complete retelling of the game's story, and that some changes may be made. So what does this mean for Abby's story? Well, it's possible that the show will make some changes to Abby's character or her role in this story in order to address some of the criticisms that the game received. However, with that said, they're not gonna change it to an extent to make it obvious that the source material was done wrong or was done in a way that didn't appeal to fans. Like, they're not gonna make it obvious. They're gonna try to stick to as much as they can, but change it here and there in order to make it work better. For example, they could give her more backstory or make her more sympathetic in order to make her more likable to audiences. They could also change some of the events of the story in order to make Joel's departure less abrupt or less traumatic for fans. And one clear way they can do that is, instead of having Joel die within the first few episodes, they're gonna add in story and they're gonna give us a lot more in between so that we don't really feel that Joel is not there for long, even though he might not be there for long in terms of his screen time. It's still not gonna feel like it because he's gonna be there throughout the entire season. On the other hand, it's also possible that the show will stick to the game's story and characters, even if it means risking more backlash and controversy. The question is, will they be able to pull it off? And will they survive it? They definitely sort of survived the backlash from the Bill and Frank episode, but that's nothing compared to, obviously, the Joel story in part 2. So we can't really lean on that to make any sort of speculation as far as will they survive the backlash this time around. But also, another thing I do want to mention, after all, The Last of Us Part 2 was a critical and commercial success despite the controversy, and many fans appreciated the game's bold storytelling and emotional depth. Let's not kid ourselves, there are fans that love the story of Part 2, so if you change that drastically, those fans are not going to be happy. So the writers are going to have to do something to make fans who hated Part 2 like it a little bit more, but also keep the fans who loved Part 2 to begin with. So that's obviously a slippery slope, and it's not an easy task for anyone. But in the end, we'll have to wait and see what the show's creators decide to do with Abby's story. Whatever they choose, it's sure to be a hotly debated topic among fans and critics alike. But one thing is certain, The Last of Us Part 2 is a story that deserves to be told, although I personally had some problems with the way that the story was told. The essence of the storyline was not bad. Like, if you think about it, it wasn't as great as part 1, obviously, but it also had a pretty awesome and interesting twist. But the problem is that, in my personal opinion, it was executed very, very poorly. And I hope that the HBO adaptation for season 2 will do it justice and keep the essence of the story, but also improve it in areas where it needs improvement. I think a lot of fans would agree with me that part 2 has a lot more room for improvement than part 1. Part 1 was, story-wise, a masterpiece. So there wasn't a lot of room for them to be creative or do anything that impacts the story in a good way. And we saw exactly that in part 1. Anytime they tried to improve things, it failed. Or not really improve, but whenever they tried to expand on things, other things fell short. Other areas that part 1 had, other stories that were great in part 1, had to be reduced in order to add these expansions, which didn't really work to their advantage. And at the end of the day, I'm definitely intrigued and can't wait to see how part 2 of the game translates into the small screen and how it plays out, whether they're going to change Abby or not. I hope that things work for the better in the TV adaptation. And I think another thing that is worth mentioning is, a lot of fans will agree, even if you loved part 2, some parts don't work in TV. So you're going to need to do some form of change in order to make it fit better for TV, just like they had to do slightly in part 1 from time to time. But that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you think the show should do to Abby's story. Do you think that they should keep it the same, or do you think that it needs to be changed? And as always, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe for more content, and press that bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.